Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning and welcome to the World Investor Week 2020. We are coming live from Abu Dhabi Global Market, the international financial center of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. My name is Jassim Marzougi, Head of Operations and Training at ADGM Academy, and it is our pleasure to welcome you all to these important sessions on investor education and investor protection. Allow me to share with you a welcome message from Mr. Hamad Al-Mazroui, Chief Operating Officer of ADGM and Managing Director
أبو ظبي العالمي. يسرنا كأكاديمية سوق أبو ظبي العالمي المشاركة في أسبوع المستثمر العالمي إلى جانب كافة أعضاء أيوسكو، وندعوكم في فعاليات هذا الأسبوع الانضمام إلى برامج وورش عمل المرئية التي تقدمها أكاديمية سوق أبو ظبي العالمي 8 أكتوبر. وسنستعرض خلال ورش العمل هذه عدة مواضيع، من أهمها أبرز التحديات العملية التي تواجهها المؤسسات والمستثمرين، بالإضافة إلى دور الصيرفة الإسلامية في حماية المستثمر. يسهم سوق أبو ظبي العالمي كمركز دولي عالمي في تعزيز مكانة أبو ظبي على مستوى العالم في التجارة والأعمال. بادر سوق أبو ظبي العالمي بتقديم حزمة دعم الأعمال للشركات المسجلة لديه، وذلك لتعزيز الجهود للتصدي للآثار الناجمة من فيروس كوفيد-19. يحرص سوق أبو ظبي العالمي على توفير أعلى مستوى من الحماية والرقابة لمجتمع الأعمال لديه من خلال وضع القوانين وأطر العمل المدروسة وتوفير جميع سبل الدعم بالتماشي مع جهود القيادة الرشيدة.
We hope you enjoyed the video. As mentioned by Hamad, we are going through challenging times due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected every part of the world. However, we remain resilient and continue to ensure our business ecosystem develops and remains a key part of the region's economic priorities. While the business environment and the way we work is rapidly changing, it is important to ensure ethics and integrity remain at the forefront by focusing on investor education and protection. This will ensure continued business prosperity and investor confidence. From ADGM's perspective, we are driven by 5 core business values, with one of the most important being integrity. With this in mind, ADGM Academy has built international partnerships with academic institutions who integrate ethics and integrity into their teaching principles. For this session on integrity at work, we are counting on you to engage with us and share your perspectives via live polling scenarios. You will find the polling links just below the video if you are following us on ADGM's website, or in the comments section should you be following us either via LinkedIn or Twitter within the comments section. I will notify you when such voting is open in order to get your responses at the right time. Please note that the polling is completely anonymous. Also, feel free to engage with us using the comments section, as we value your input and participation. Joining me today to discuss the real-life ethical challenges faced in the workplace is Mr. Kevin Moore, Global Director of the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investment. Welcome, Kevin, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Jassim. It's a great pleasure to take part in this session. The subject of integrity matters a lot to me. I'm going to do a very, very brief biography, really only to make the point that I am a practitioner. You know, I'm someone who spent 34 years in financial services, my whole working life after university, 21 of them for a bank, working in corporate finance, in retail, high street banking, and for 10 years in wealth management and private banking. I have granted loans to customers, I have sold bank accounts and sold investments. So I've done these things, and therefore, you know, I've seen the impact that some of the scandals and some of the bad things that have happened in financial services have had on the reputation of the banking profession and the people that work in it. So I've been very pleased, particularly at the CISI, where integrity features as one of our three main strands of our work: the qualifications, continuing professional development, and behavior. And little did I know how important it was going to be 13 years ago when I first joined the CISI. But as the examples and the discussion today will show, it is, as you said, Jassim, absolutely critical that we build greater trust than we have today, and maintain deserve the public trust by doing the right thing. So, Jassim, I think it's over to the virtual fireside.
Thank you, Kevin. And again, warm virtual welcome to you.
Same to you. I could feel the flames from the virtual fireside even as we speak.
Kevin, I wanted to share with you an interesting quote from Samuel Johnson, who's an English writer, where he stated, "Integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, and knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful." How has this translated into our financial ecosystem today?
It's a great quotation, isn't it? And it's a few hundred years old. I'm going to warn everyone in advance. There'll be a few other quotations thrown into the mix today, but that one from Samuel Johnson a few hundred years ago, very true. If you just put yourself in an investor's shoes, we've all invested in things. So you're sitting in front of someone. Now, you generally want to like them. I think people like to like and sort of feel some sort of bond. I had someone here yesterday trying to, in my house, conservatory, an extension to my home, and he was a nice man. I could feel him as a salesperson trying to develop a relationship with me. But my salesperson bit in my head was saying, yeah, don't get too far down the route of liking this guy. It's a business transaction. But nevertheless, it's people interacting. So, like the person. But really what I wanted out of the conservatory guy yesterday, I wanted to know that he knew what he was talking about as well. That he understood the issues, that I wasn't going to end up with a terrible conservatory that leaked, that the drainage was right, that didn't catch the sun, didn't do what I wanted. Now, in financial services, it's even more critical, I think, that the person that you're talking to is trustworthy and knowledgeable. They combine the two things. If they're just knowledgeable, and particularly if they've also got the gift of the gab, the ability to speak well and to relate to people, then you get the snake oil salesperson. You get the person that could sell anything to anybody. And I think too much of that, in financial services, too much value attached to people that could sell, but not necessarily do it in the right way. So, for example, when I worked in banking, actually, there was a lot of praise for the people that topped the league tables for sales. Fred, because you've been the best person at selling this particular product. And it wasn't long though before people realized actually you needed to look quite carefully at the people at the top of league tables, because we're doing things in the wrong way. But there was a naivety, and that's back to the Samuel Johnson quote. I don't think it was people in the bank when I worked there being deliberately ignorant or even willfully ignorant and thinking, well, as long as we get the sales. I think they just didn't think things through. But with experience, you started to realize that actually that if our compliance people would look very carefully at the top performers to make sure they were doing the right thing, and make sure that they did know what they were talking about. So, because unfortunately, out there in the world, it isn't always obvious to spot people that are doing the wrong thing. And it might be, using the Samuel Johnson thing, that they are decent people, but they just don't know what they're talking about. So they don't understand, say, the risk of a bond that they're selling to a customer. And because they don't understand it, they don't communicate it. Yeah. Or they deliberately don't tell the customer about the risk, because they know that if they talk to the customer too much about the risk, that might put the customer off, and they'll go into a less profitable investment. By profitable, I mean for the person giving the advice as opposed to the customer.
And I think a very important item that you mentioned here, or a word that you mentioned that's very important, is trust. When it comes to trust, we also talked about a little bit of the different professions that we have and that we're looking into. Bankers is one of them. where do some of these professions sit when it comes to the general public with respect to the level of trust?
Well, it's really interesting because, of course, I'm going to generalize hugely because we use when I'm doing the presentation, sometimes we use a couple of different polls, a Mori poll and some others, to look at trust. Now, bankers, and we'll just use bankers as a generic word for financial services because, again, I'm not avoiding the question, I will come back to it, but it's interesting when you talk to people in financial services that most people think that any lack of trust is somebody else's fault. I've talked to investment bankers in wholesale who think that the problem is retail, and I've talked to people in retail banks who think that the problem is in wholesale. Everybody sort of thinks that the problem is somewhere else. I went to a presentation once with chief executives saying that they thought the trust in their bank was fine, but they weren't convinced about trust in the whole sector. And when you start to think that through, it's not very logical. But financial services is the ultimate, trust profession. I mean, another quotation, JP Morgan, when asked what was the foundation of finance, said trust, because you have to, you can't see what you're buying. In terms of trust in the, in a league table, banking is sort of, and financial services have improved, but in terms of trending against other areas like technology, for example, the trust in technology is the most trusted area, which I frankly find very strange since technology generally goes wrong. But I think there's a trust in the sort of the businesses that are doing this in Google and whatever. Financial services is at the bottom in terms of global trust in areas. Even people making cars, the automotive industry, that's ahead. Healthcare, that's ahead. And at the bottom is financial services. It has improved. I mean, it was at its lowest in the wake of the financial crisis, and over the years it's trending up, but not enough to take itself off the bottom of the league table. There's even a statistic that's a UK statistic that said that children trusted bankers more than adults, and it was an interesting survey of me, and it sort of showed that if you were a cynic, you'd say that children trusted the idea of banking because they haven't actually experienced it, but when adults who'd actually experienced banking and maybe felt, no, the bank's more interested in making a profit from me than actually genuinely looking after my interests, the adults that had the experience of the adults trusted financial services less, which is not good for anyone, as you said in your introduction.
Right. And I think it's interesting to the Mori poll is where you mentioned, the trend and where we're going. When it comes to bankers and also when it comes to financial leaders as well. The poll, it's done from 1983 until 2017, and even with financial leaders, the trend has been upwards, and it's been, people are putting more trust into these professions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of work has gone on. I mean, the interactive session that we're doing today for, which is the CISI sort of big contribution in this area. We've run all over the world for, this time last year, I was looking at my diary, back in the days of international travel. And, I spent a week in the Emirates doing, I think about 1 or 2 of these sessions a day for a variety of institutions, some international, some local. And, all of the major international, the global banks have run, big cultural change programs, probably more than one cultural change program, to try and reinforce the importance of values and doing the right thing. But I think it's one of those activities that you just got to keep doing and keep demonstrating it. It's the difference, isn't it, between a code of conduct and actually living the code of conduct. I mean, every organization, you go onto a web page, every organization will say customer comes first. Nobody is going to say, actually, do you know what? Customer's really second. First of all, we're intent on making sure we all get paid and I can keep my house and my cars and everything like that. Nobody's going to say that, but some people might be thinking that. So I think it's critical. So today's event, I think, is perfect, absolutely spot on. But I suspect we'll need to keep doing this sort of thing in different ways to make people realize just how important it is that the investor can trust the people in which they're investing, or trust the businesses in which they're investing.
And Kevin, just to put a little bit of context for our audience and our viewers, when we're talking about the position of different professions, what sits at the top of the level of trust from a profession's perspective, and I guess what sits on the lower end as well?
Well, right at the top, you've got sort of doctors and nurses, which again, when you start to think about it, in the introductory video, there's the reference to COVID-19, and I think certainly in the UK, and I'm sure around the world, the sort of respect for the health for people working and looking after us at this time has risen immensely, and that was reflected in these surveys year after year. You go to hospital, you see your doctor, and again, back to the Samuel Johnson, you don't want a nice doctor, do you? You don't want to go in and see a horrible doctor. You don't want a doctor that shouts at you and says you're too fat, you should get, is really horrible. On the other hand, you want a doctor that is expert, and you also want a doctor that has kept their knowledge up to date, which is in terms of the activities that you're involved in at the academy and the CISI is involved in. Just how critical it is to keep people's knowledge up to date, but underpinned by integrity. Same with the doctor. You don't want the doctor giving you the drug that maybe gets them the best money. You want the drug that gives you the best chance of recovery. But the fact is that people do trust the medical profession, doctors and nurses. At the other end of the scale, below bankers, bankers are about 2/3 of the way down the list. It's sort of but below them, inevitably in some ways, politicians generally, but also you've got sort of real estate as well as an area, real estate salespeople, advertising. Because that's what advertising is for, isn't it? To tell you a good story, basically. So they're not really a surprise, any of those. And bankers were, I mean, in the wake of the financial crisis in particular, the bankers on that Murray poll were lower down. So it's pulled up, but back to back to JP Morgan's quote: if financial services is based on trust and are still only, either which way you look at it, 2/3 of the way down or 1/3 of the way up the league table, that isn't good enough for a trust profession. You really would want to be, wouldn't you, right up at the top end somewhere, if you were saying, well, my business is all about trust. So plenty of room for improvement.
Definitely. And we actually have one contribution from the audience so far, from Amin, who mentioned that, when it came to the tech side of it, he mentioned that tech is more trusted possibly because of the tech controls themselves, because you have that, those controls in place to, ensure that level of trust. There's a mechanism there.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, isn't it? And it's interesting and developing area, in financial services, obviously with fintech, but there's generally people behind the fintech at some point, and algorithms and calculations. Someone's come up with them. I mean, we've even had a seminar on fintech and ethics, which is quite interesting. It's almost very much the future, isn't it, when you're talking about the ethics of an algorithm. But yeah, I mean, I think there is, and of course, the moves by people like in terms of how you interact with technology. Say something like Facebook as an interface between there's this huge, great technical platform sitting behind something that looks very simple. But even the moves they're taking, perhaps to sort of make sure that their platforms aren't used to disseminate fake news. Help demonstrate that there is actually an attempt by tech to balance free speech with the need to protect people from being told something that is blatantly untrue and potentially dangerous. So yeah, and again, people are comfortable, aren't they, with tech? I think particularly younger people. I'm at the other end of the scale, but younger people are very tech savvy. I had a conversation with my colleague. We have an office in Mumbai, and we were talking about bribery and corruption because we were doing an internal session around the UK Bribery Act, and the only defense against the Bribery Act is that you've been taught about it, that that you shouldn't take a bribe. And we're saying about the importance of social media, which again is a spin-off out of tech, isn't it? In terms of improving trust and anti-corruption in particular in India, because people could film things. and people were being encouraged perhaps to film interactions. And so maybe day-to-day commonplace examples of relatively low-level bribery and corruption would now be public, be on Instagram or whatever, TikTok within seconds. TikTok, they'd have to dance, wouldn't they? But whatever, they could be made public. So in that level of transparency is perhaps helping as well. So that's another area where tech is making a positive contribution.
Right. No, very interesting. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about during today's session. So to our viewers, we will be moving now and beginning our presentation, where the first scenario that we'll go through, myself and Kevin will discuss and talk about. And the following scenarios after that, we will ask for your participation. So over to the presentation now.
I want to go to the next slide. Yeah, now I'll this is a really sort of integrity 101. For today's session, we're going to focus on these 4 words: honesty, openness, transparency, and fairness. Now, I looked at, if you look at any code of conduct, these are the words that tend to pop up. Any regulator making statements around behavior and integrity will use one or more of these words. So today, in terms of the session, and we're going to start, Jassim and I will do the first one together, where he will in effect represent the audience, and in the other 3 scenarios after that, you will have an opportunity to make your judgment call on which of 4 options you would choose, and to try and think of these words: honesty, openness, transparency, and fairness. So honesty, we all understand that it's a common capital around the world. Openness and transparency, pretty much the same thing, but it's almost, would you be happy telling your mother or your father or someone whose opinion really matters to you? Would you be comfortable explaining your rationale to them? And if you were, then then you'd be comfortable being open and transparent. And fairness. I mean, fairness is an interesting concept. I mean, probably something we all think about and use the word more at school when we're young. Going to bed, it's not fair. Those of you with younger children probably hear this word more often than anyone else. But let's pull back that concept of balance, fairness. If one person is winning big time and one person's losing big time, that's possibly unfair. Not necessarily. That's the whole point about today. It's not about absolutes. This is about the margins and thinking about the ambiguity around decisions. But I will keep coming back with Jassim on honesty, openness, transparency, and fairness when we're making the decisions. Next slide. So the pattern for all of the dilemmas will be the same. I will tell a story. Then we will present you and initially Jassim, and then everybody else with 4 options. You can practice the first one. So Jassim is the guinea pig. He'll be the speaking guinea pig, and tell me. We'll have a discussion around it. But nothing to stop you all. Although you're not physically voting in this first one, you can still have a decision. So this is like, do you want to be a millionaire? This is your chance. This is sort of where integrity meets quiz show. So it's a chance to join in and see what you think. Do you agree with, in this instance, Jassim and I? And when we do the other scenarios later on, you're going to see an answer of the 4 that is the answer that the CISI's Integrity Committee have come up with. Now, they have no, they don't know the sort of universal truth or anything. They have no more insight than you collectively, but it's to give you a benchmark. So they will have come up with an answer of the 4, and it's up to us all to think, well, is that the right one? Do we agree with that completely, or is there an argument for one of the other 4 options? I mean, this is unlike a CISI exam, where if you get 4 options in an exam, only 1 is right. In this situation, more than 1 or 2 could look right, and it's up to us, to you all out there as well, to decide which one is the most correct. Okay, next slide, please. So I'll tell the story, but you can read the words as well. But the bottom line is, you're starting at the top, so you're the chairman. So this isn't around. So if there's any chairman out there, then that's obviously not a promotion. But I suspect that the majority of people, this is a promotion. You're now the chairman of a firm of fund managers, so very appropriate when we're talking about investor protection. And you, Amir, and Amir's worked for you for a long time. He's done a great job, and he joined you back in the 80s. So he's worked his way up, and you've decided that at this point, Amir should be recognized and rewarded by being made a full director, by being promoted to the board. You know, he's serving, he's an excellent fund manager, he's done a great job, you know well, and you know, you absolutely have backed him for this promotion to the board. But one of your directors contacts you and says, look, let's just pretend it's me for the sake of it. So Kevin, you know, I think I ought to tell you, I've the CV, the resume that was attached to the board papers, and I know that it says that Amir graduated, but I was at university with Amir and he didn't graduate. I don't remember the circumstances, but it's unusual. I do remember that something happened. I think something happened at home, and he had to leave before the final exams. So I don't think he ever actually qualified. I don't think he ever actually got his degree. Is launching a new fund. Amir is one of the key people involved, and in the literature, the marketing literature, and you know, it does say that he's got a BSc. So it does quote, you know, that says he's got a degree. His resume says that he's got a degree. His resume that he used when he first joined the business. So you pull Amir into your office and say, Amir, look, it's an awkward question, and I hope that there's a good answer, but you know, I've been advised that you actually don't hold the degree that we're telling you hold, and indeed you told us that you held when you joined the company. Amir says, yep. He confesses that he's very sorry. It's true. He didn't graduate. His mother died. There was you know, it was a terrible time for his family. His father was going off the rails. His brothers and sisters needed him at home to sort of hold the family together. So, you know, he went home, unfortunately missed his final exams, and by the time really that he was able to sort of think about extra or life outside the family, the opportunity to take the degree had gone. So he was desperate for a job again. He needed money to help his family. So, you know, he'd done the study, so he didn't think it was that serious. So that's the situation. It is not Amir Hadid BSc. He is just plain old Amir Hadid. And you now know that. So the next slide will show you the options that you've now got, or in this case, Jim has got. In terms of, you know, what are you going to do now as chairman? You've got 4 options. Now, the first one, well, you're not going to worry about it too much. I mean, let's face it, all a long time ago. You know, the facts are simple. He's done a great job. He is a good fund manager. So on that basis, it's not material, is it? So yes, of course, you're going to have to tidy up the advertising and remove the references to the BSc because those are incorrect. But you know, it's good news for option A. Is good news for Amir. He is still invited to join the board. Option B, not quite so good for Amir. You say to Amir, look, you know, I think you've let yourself and you've let the business down here. I'd like you to show that you're sorry for doing that by paying a fine, perhaps to charity. And unfortunately, I can't, in the circumstances, promote you to the board. I'm going to make the references to the degree off the advertising, but you keep your job, Amir. You know, you've worked for us for a long time, so you can keep your job. So option A is full on congratulations, Amir. It's pretty much business as usual. Option B, no longer joining the board, but you keep your job, and you know, I would like you to pay something to charity. So A and B, pretty good outcomes for Amir. Option C starts to turn against Amir now at this point. So option C, well, not only you know, can you not join the board, but I think the right thing for you to do would be resign. So you suggest basically to Amir that he resigns and that he you know, basically on his own volition. But you're pretty well indicating that if he doesn't do option C, take the resignation option, then you would instigate disciplinary processes. So it's been simplified here to sack, but you would begin the process where that could well be the outcome. So you would begin the process of saying, I'm sorry, you've fundamentally deceived the business, and so we will discipline you. While we're disciplining you, you're going to have to be suspended. and you'll amend the launch material to remove him completely. So A and B keeps his job, A as a director, B keeps his existing job, C resign, and D, you look to the option of sacking him.
Yeah, well, it's a challenging dilemma, and I would understand people would have different opinions and different responses depending on their own personal circumstances and also where they're sitting. A lot of the when it comes to investors, institutional investors focus a lot on key man clause. So you mentioned that Amir was was kind of one of the lead individuals with the fund. So if he's to leave, then that puts the fund in a difficult position because they have to go back to all of their institutional investors and explain the situation. And then of course you have external parties that are looking at you and then kind of coming and then checking everything within your fund. But I think going back to what you mentioned in the beginning, Kevin, is that you mentioned some of the key principles, and one of them is honesty, right? So Amir in this situation wasn't honest from the start, and that's kind of the going back to kind of the core premise or principle is that there wasn't that honesty. So again, not my personal opinion, but I would assume that different people would answer differently, of course. But for me, I would say, because of that principle that he hasn't been honest, that he would have to leave.
So, do you think leave by resignation or leave by dismissal? Do you think people would go?
I mean, it depends on how. But I would say, I'm more inclined for C. From my, I would say more on the C, of asking them to leave.
Okay, well, you mentioned the honest, open, transparent, and fair. I mean, if you're absolutely right, if you just traffic lighted honest, open, transparent, and fair, and looked at his behaviour, he's not been honest, as he said. He's not been open or transparent about it because effectively he's been caught a long time into his career. And in terms of fairness, well, effectively, he got the job under false pretenses in one sense, and he exposed your business to potential criticism. He said he's a BSc. Now, again, the degree might not be relevant to the fund, but on the other hand, it's not relevant. Why are the marketing people even bothering to put BSc onto it? It could have been talked about tech. It could have been something technical where it would add credibility to him as a fund manager if he could demonstrate, a background in science or in a part of science. It's difficult to see how anything is better than red, pretty much, in terms of if you were traffic lighting. So on that basis, he goes, yeah. But on the other hand, I do get the difficulty, the business impact of him going. The first time I did this presentation was to a group of compliance managers for a major investment bank in London, and frankly, I found a large group of compliance managers quite scary. I found one compliance manager when I worked in a bank scary, so a whole group of compliance managers completely scary. And here's this scenario, and interestingly, and this would have been around the time of the crisis, but before everybody really knew how it was panning out. They all kept him in. Not everybody, and I mean, one of the things we'll see when we get the I hope we see when we get the voting from all the attendees on the different channels, is that you do get this variety of opinion. You don't get everybody going A or B or C or D. You might trend towards one end, so you might get a trend towards C and D, but you're going to have somebody going A and B, A in particular. And these guys years back said, well, hang on, impact on the business, shareholder value, protecting shareholder value. What damage would result, if he were to go, and all of which is completely valid. But if you think about it, if you have like an ethical flowchart that says, point one, how valuable is the person to the business? And if they're valuable, you basically, ethics aren't really on the table. You don't worry too much about their behavior. If they're not valuable, easy. Then you can dismiss them, let them go, because actually that won't impact on your business. Well, life isn't going to be that easy, is it? But when you look at some of the high profile, say, rogue traders over the years, and you think, well, these were people that were presumably making good money. Back to the Nick Leeson and Barings, then the JP Morgan, London Whale, you've got the SocGen rogue traders. One thing they've got in common is they were making, they were doing good business up until the point it all went wrong, at which point, obviously, it cost the business, huge amounts of money. In the case of Barings, cost it its independent existence. So, so going down that route of saying, well, let's not look too closely at what someone's doing because they're successful is a dangerous route. But let's have a look at the next slide and see what the CISI's integrity committee. Well, there you go. Jassim, you can send your application in at the end of the presentation. Sometimes when I've done this, I actually highlight both C and D because if this was a presentation and people were feeding back in, I think what you'd get with C is you'd get people saying, yeah, well, you owe him something. He's worked for you for a long time. Do you really want to kill off his whole future career by dismissing him? So you want to give the guy a chance, and that's a compassionate and good thing to do. But you're still saying, no, it's not acceptable that this guy works here. I don't want people, and they would find out. Everybody would find out. Why the marketing team would wonder, why are we taking the BSc off the marketing literature? That sort of thing. So it would come out, and it could present a double standard for the business. But some people would say, no, you're being too kind. And also you're not protecting the reputation of the business, because if you applied honest, open, transparent, and fair to the decision as opposed to the act, then are you being open and transparent if you let them resign? Because what if Amir pops up in 6 months' time for another company, with a business card with BSc still on it? What are you going to do then? And particularly with the link with IOSCO, what about the regulators here? Was this person in a function where if he was going to on the board, then the likelihood is that it could well be some form of, I'll use the phrase controlled function, but a function of interest to the regulator. On those grounds, would you want to be, it could look like you were actually covering this up by allowing him to resign and doing that for the wrong reasons. So I think C is that, the committee's answer and your answer, Jassim, but I think there is a case for D as well. And A and B, perfectly understandable, but very difficult to say that integrity matters if when you catch someone out on something fairly fundamental like this, that you don't take, you don't take any action.
Yeah.
So should we move on to the next one then, Jassim? Are we ready to let the attendees take part? Just before we do that, then there's, this is another statistic. This changes. It's against the law in some countries, actually. Yeah. And of course it's fraudulent. It's straightforwardly fraudulent. You're misrepresenting yourself. And I know, again, going around the world delivering this presentation, it is fascinating. People will often tell you, we had one the other day. We had this, we had that. Someone once applied to join the CISI who claimed at the top of the page to be a CISI member, and they weren't. Which, back to the Samuel Johnson, that's just stupid as well, isn't it? That's both unethical and immensely stupid, because, although, frankly, we weren't too clever ourselves, because we didn't check it till he actually came for the interview, because it was straightforward. He put his name at the top, chartered member, and then, but on the day of the interview, I wanted to see how long he'd been a member, and then I checked he wasn't one. So that interview was the shortest on record. It was embarrassing. 10 minutes. So I'm really sorry.
And I think also, Kevin, it's about there are some gray areas, right? Specific, if you talk, for instance, someone who did, talks about project management experience, and they did one project in their entire career, but they mention, I have project management experience. So what do you say for those kind of gray areas where maybe there's some more questions that need to be asked and understanding as to what that specific explanation is within, or that description within their CV is?
I think that's a great point, because this is all about navigating the grey, and working out where the lines are. To me, the answer on the project management one is that, if ask yourself the question, if you say you were putting something on your CV and you said, I can do this, can you at least substantiate that in a discussion? So with the project management one, you might not have much experience in project management, but as long as if the interviewer said to you, could you, tell me a bit more about your project management? If you've got something substantive to say, I was involved in this project, and you've got a good answer, then you're sort of towards the darker end of the grey, or the lighter end of the grey. Let's go lighter end. So that's sort of justifiable. And at the other end of the scale, you've never done any project management, but you just put it on. I mean, a presentation I delivered with this scenario a few years ago, I said about the things they often being really interesting, and sort of, in my mind, building up a sort of a story around it. One young man said to me, what about LinkedIn? Because many of the attendees are using LinkedIn today. But he said, what about your profile on LinkedIn? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I view LinkedIn as a shop window. And so I want to look as good as I can in that shop window, because I'm on LinkedIn primarily, for job opportunities and to be picked up by somebody. So he said, I've put all sorts of things on LinkedIn that aren't true, qualifications, experience, everything, because I want to present the most attractive picture. And my view is, I then get into a job, then I can demonstrate that I am as good as all the things I've said, so there won't be a problem. Interesting was that you look around the room, and obviously I can't now, so you don't get sort of. But if I did have a room full of people and somebody said that, what's really good is that people look shocked. In that room, his colleagues and others were looking shocked because they could see that in terms of the grey, this person had just shot well past that. Their profile was a lie, and it was just a misrepresentation, and that is wrong. And that if they were relying on the business to catch them out, then and if they didn't catch them out, then fair enough. Well, that again is not an ethical standpoint. If I can get away with it, I'll do it. Is not generally a good thing to be saying. And the positive thing is that most people recognize that, but some people that don't.
Yeah, very true. Kevin, before we jump into the scenarios for our audience and viewers, again, thank you very much, everyone, for those who are contributing to the comments and sending across your inputs and feedback. Kevin, Sandeep has mentioned that he has a question, which he said, is it right to treat integrity as a separate issue, or should it be attributed to social and cultural norms and issues?
Well, I know answer in two phases, because social and cultural norms. Are we talking about different social and cultural norms in different parts of the world? I mean, I get that cultural norms are by definition local to some extent. What I'd say about integrity is that I was asked to do an article a couple of years ago about integrity on a global basis. Did I see differences doing this presentation in different parts of the world? Did I see notable swings or trends that you could say, if you went to this part of the world, they'll all employ Amir. No one sacks him. Go somewhere else, everybody sacks him. And the answer from my experience was that actually it's the same globally. Some people might think you'll keep him for the reasons that we've discussed and that you've mentioned, Jassim, but that there is no sort of, there's no place I've ever been to where you saw a swing towards one end or the other. And I had a colleague who's recently left us, actually left the CISI, but she'd studied academically. I've never studied it academically. As I say, I'm a practitioner and I've read around the topic and I'm interested, but I've never studied it as an academic topic. And I asked her if there was any, evidence of, localized norms being different, or the norms in one place being very, very different around integrity. I mean, they said no. That in fact, they had studied this, as part of her master, and actually, trust was a fundamental human thing. What country you came from, what background you came from, trust was a sort of universal concept and universally admired, and respected. Trust was a good thing. So I don't think, so I think if that was the question, Sandeep, then I think the good news is, I think as humans, this is a shared shared issues, shared problems, shared understanding, different language, but the same concepts and ideas. That's as good as I can do on that one.
And so, Kevin, let's go on to the next slide and jump into one of the scenarios.
If we go to the next slide. Next one. We can move on from that one. Yeah. So this time you'll be voting, but the principle's the same. Try and keep those words honest, open, transparent, and fair. Locked in mind, like a four light traffic light that we're going to be thinking green, amber, red. You know, what are you going to do? So we'll go straight into the next slide, and I'll talk through the story again.
And to our viewers, like I mentioned earlier within this session, you will find a link that we will open up for all of you within the comment section in LinkedIn as well as Twitter, and you'll find it at the bottom of the page within ADGEM's website. So once we take you through the different options, we will then open up the poll for you all to vote. All right, Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Jassim. Thank you. So last time you were a chairman, I'm afraid that you're now being sort of dropped down the scale a bit. So you're now a senior supervisor, but you've got a managerial role, and you're working in operations, the back office part of a major financial services business. Now your business is restructuring. You know that because if you work in a big business, big businesses are always restructuring, and you know that restructuring is often another word for job losses. It's seen that the restructure will mean that some people, many people indeed, could be losing their jobs. Now, on your way to work, against this backdrop of the uncertainty over the future of the business and of the future of jobs, on the way to work, your brother-in-law, Matthew, he works in the same, in operations, but he's not directly, he's not in your line, he's not in your team directly or anything like that, but he works for the business in the same area. Matthew, your brother-in-law, contacts you and says, absolutely great news for the family, that Jason, his son, your nephew, has passed the exam into a top US university. It's been his dream, and Matthew and your sister are very keen that his ambition is fulfilled. He's passed the exam, and that's the sort of the easy bit in one sense. The tough bit is it's going to cost a lot of money. And, you know, but Matthew and your sister are determined to crimp and save their way through and make sure that Jason gets the opportunity that he's worked so hard to achieve. And you to come round. So Matthew says, come round this evening. We're going to have a family dinner. Jason's going to be the sort of, you know, the center of attention as we celebrate his success with the family. Next slide. Now, when you get to work, your boss calls you in, the divisional manager calls you in and says, look, you know, you've probably heard the rumors, but actually some of the results and the forecasts are worse maybe than perhaps people even understand, and jobs are definitely going. We're going to have to cut some jobs. So he gives you a list of names and he says, look, this is absolutely top secret. This list of names of people that are earmarked for redundancy is absolutely secret. The only reason I'm sharing it with you as a trusted member of the management team is that you need to plan for this. You know, you're going to have to think about these people, the people that are involved, how it's going to be communicated. We've got to operationalize this whole process, and you as the key line managers are going to be involved. There's a whole team of others, but the big thing is this list is being given to you terms of strict confidentiality. Now, and if you've either read it or you'll have guessed it, because it wouldn't be much of a scenario if it wasn't, then when you look at the list, sure enough, Matthew's name pops up. First one to gaze as you look at the list, and you notice that his performance appraisal, there's some other information, and you notice actually that he wasn't doing well, something that's never really come up. So you now know that your business is going to be making a number of people redundant. You've had privileged access to the list, and you know that your brother-in-law is one of the people who is almost certain to be losing their job. So now it's decision time. Next one. Thanks. Now, for this one, all of you, I want you to try and picture the scene. we've all got families, or most people have families. To imagine you're at this family dinner now, and you're the person, you're the person with this decision to make, and you know that your brother-in-law's job is likely to go, almost certain to go. So at the family dinner, your mother takes you to one side, away from the table, away from the talk and the chatter, away from Jason basking in the glory of his success of getting into this university. And she takes you to a corner of the room. Now she's smaller than you, so you look down, she looks up. Your eyes meet. She's looking deeply into your eyes. This is your mother. And you've always liked to think as well that you're the apple of her eye. You're the favored son or daughter. It doesn't matter. It's gender neutral. And she looks into your eyes and says, look, can you assure me that Matthew's job is safe? Because I've heard, I think you've mentioned before about rumors about the business and problems, because these university fees are a huge commitment. And Matthew, they will have to use all of their reserves, all of their savings. Sorry, can we go back to the slide? They will have to use all of their resources to fund Jason through the university, and he's going to need a job to do it. So, can you assure me? And again, your mother's eyes are looking straight into your eyes. She's asking you this question: can you reassure me that Matthew's job is safe? 4 options. So the first one, well, mother, you're right, there is an air of uncertainty, but I don't know of anything specific. So I can't answer the question. I don't know of any specific plans or names. So that's option A. Option B, you're right, mother, something is happening, but don't worry, because I will look after Matthew. I will make sure nothing bad happens to him. So option A, say basically I know nothing. I don't know anything about this. Option B, you say, well, I do know something, but don't worry, Matthew will be fine. I will look after him. Option C, more confessional. Oh, mother, I'm so glad you asked me. I've been unable to eat the whole evening. I've been torn up inside because I know Matthew is going to lose his job. And unfortunately, now I've told you I could lose my job too because I'm not supposed to tell anyone. So C is professional. D, you say, mother, we should be celebrating Jason's success. It's not the right time to talk about this. Let's go back to the table and have some of the lovely food that's been prepared. So A, B, C, D. So I think out there in the wide world, you're going to have a couple of minutes to make your decision and to vote. I don't know if I'm going to remind everybody about how you vote, but you're going to have a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, Jassim and I'll get the virtual fireside fired up again and just say a few things that we think.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now poll. As I mentioned before, we will give a short couple of minutes in order for all of you to answer the poll. As mentioned before, you will find a link. If you're following us on LinkedIn or Twitter, you'll find a link within the comments section. If you're following us on ADGM, you should find it at the bottom of the ADGM page. So we are now opening the poll. We will be going live. So we'd love to hear your feedback on this scenario. It's a difficult one, Kevin. I mean, you could set the whole mood for the rest of the dinner.
It is. I mean, it's funny. We have different scenarios that we use, and this is one that, funny enough, my colleague in India, Ganesh, who used to run our business there, I tried it out in India, and I wasn't really sure about it, but he loved it, and he said that it really struck home because I'm sure it's the same in other countries, but particularly in India, the mother is venerated, and to have your mother staring into your eyes. I've delivered this in Indian audiences where I have actually tried to get people to role play it, to really just make people actually feel that it's their mother looking at them. This isn't a work situation, a colleague or a customer. This is your mother. It's a tricky one. There's one other thing, actually, just saying one other, story from this. The first time I did this, I said this, the one about the investment bank, but this scenario I also used in Greece, and particularly interesting time for Greece. It was literally a day before there was rioting in the streets about the financial crisis and the impact it was going to have in Greece. And in fact, I'd spent the day walking around Athens with a big suitcase we used voting machines so people could vote live in the room. and I'd carry this ridiculously heavy suitcase around all day, and you could feel the tension, and there were policemen on the streets and the riot police and all of this, protesters outside the Greek Houses of Parliament. And I didn't even expect the bank involved to turn up to the session. I thought, they did, bless them. They turned up, and a lot of them were traders, and they were having, you can imagine, if you were a trader in Greece at that time, you couldn't give bonds away. So they were really, they were having probably the hardest time of their lives, and they turned up this session, and I thought it would be dreadful, and actually it was great. And when we did this scenario, and I put these options, it was just a laugh around the room. Everyone laughed, and I wasn't really expecting a laugh, and I sort of stood there, and I wondered, was it me? Had I spilt something on my tie or whatever, and in the end, I picked a guy in the front row. Again, something we can't do today, really. But I picked a guy in the front row and said, "Help me out. Have I done something stupid? Why is this one so funny? This scenario?" And the guy looked at me and said, "It's really simple, Kevin. In Greece, you don't lie to your mother." So, for him, it was option C. Was pretty, and yet they were all, frankly, they're all professional people. They understood the and they understood that your professional integrity might pull you in a different direction. But a hugely real dilemma. Your mother looking into your eyes, pretty well only one answer you could give. So it'd be interesting what the poll shows.
Definitely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're closing the poll now to get your views and your answers and choices out of this scenario itself. So we'll now close the polls. And I think it's interesting because, a lot of times we think to ourselves that there are certain practices that, stay in the office and they remain within your business, your business environment. And as soon as you leave it, you don't have to worry about it anymore. But this is a clear example of, you have to maintain integrity and ethics in your practice, no matter whether you're at, family dinner table or in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as I say, it'll be interesting to see what the vote is. But yeah. The pull between family loyalty, not just of course the issue of whether or not what you tell your mother, but how far can you go to help out Matthew? Right. On one level, so you've got the obvious thing of, oh well, what do I tell my mother, and then what do I do? How if I really can I really deliver B? Say I'm going to look out for him. Can I actually do that? Because it's quite difficult to be sure that you could. And even if you could, would that be fair?
And Kevin, we have the results now from the audience. So we have 23% voted A, 30% voted B, none voted C, and 46% voted D. So well, A and B, 20%, 30%, a larger number D at 46%.
Well, there's that is interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, everybody's avoided the sort of the professional. You've told your boss, haven't you, that you can't tell any. Your boss has made it very clear this is confidential information. So you can't argue that you don't know what the job is expecting you to do. What your professional duty is to keep quiet. So everybody's avoided that one. It's interesting though that again there's no absolute agreement. Yep, 46, so nearly half the people have gone for D, but two fairly equal groups have gone for A and B, and that's back to my first point. If there's anything that people I'd ask people to remember from this session, that there is not universal agreement. If you were talking to a room full of people, so for example, I look back at my own career and think about number of times that I would have looked at a group and said, for example, I might have said, look, it's really important we hit our targets this quarter. Go out there and do your absolute best. If we don't do it, there could be job losses. We know it's a serious situation. Some people in the room might interpret that as Kevin's telling me do anything. Do cheat, maybe do tell, that stretch the boundaries basically in terms of what you how you would perform in terms of behavior, somebody else might not. And I think, you know, the fact that, so, and hopefully we'll see the same thing. I mean, I'm banking on it because it's pretty well always happens, but having said it, maybe it won't. But you always get this spread of answers, you know, and it just shows that the person, if you were all sitting in a real room, a real auditorium, and you were voting with a little machine, you probably vote thinking, I'm sure most people would agree with me. And the fact is, actually, no, that's not quite true. There's always a group of people who would take a different opinion. So let's see what happens when we move on to the next scenario, to see if we still get that spread of opinions that makes the whole area, frankly, so interesting, because it's about those shades of grey.
Definitely.
The Integrity Committee come up with. Next slide, please. Yep, so back, well, we saw it very briefly, it doesn't matter. It was the last option. So the 46% of people that voted for D, that's the same answer as the Integrity Committee, only because, and it gets a bit into semantics, doesn't it, into the language. A, not strictly honest, you do know. So you are telling your mother a lie if you do A, and B, you're promising something that A, you might not be able to deliver, and B, even if you could deliver, is potentially unfair. So, you know, that's why the Integrity Committee have gone for D, even though, and I'll keep this brief, even though you pitch yourself forward now, it's 2 weeks forward, poor old Matthew's lost his job, your mother looks you in the eye, but this Matthew and your sister are potentially divorcing because they've fallen out, because she's now found out that he was as good as his job as he'd said he was. Jason is now unable to go to university, so he's up in his room with his headphones on, not talking to anybody. And your mother looks you in the eye again and says, when I asked you that question 2 weeks ago, did you tell me the truth? Did you know your brother or your brother-in-law? So even option D, those of you that have voted for option D, patting yourselves on the back because it's the same answer as the Integrity Committee, I suspect your mother will never quite view you in the same way again. But anyway, we'll move on to the...
There's actually Nick Bullman has also provided some interesting and good feedback in regards to prior to the dinner itself. And he said that he should also declare at work that his brother-in-law is on the list, and it may be a conflict of interest if he is involved in his brother-in-law's firing. So he's taking, going back to the actual point in time where that list was given to him.
That's a really good point. I mean, there are other things that he could have done. I mean, he could have avoided the dinner, just said, I'm really sorry, I can't make it. I'm not saying that's, this is the whole point. It's great that Nick's come up with that, because this is the whole point. Once you start to think about it, then there are all sorts of different aspects. Now we'll do the next scenario. We'll do this one quite quickly because I want to allow time for the last one, which is my personal favorite. But mention technology. This is a tech-related scenario. So next slide, please. So there's a few facts to sort of to gather here before you can make your decision. But basically, this is about Ed. Ed's a computer programmer, and he works at home. He used to work in the office, but the business was even pre-COVID, where working at home is the new normal. But pre that, the business is set up so he could work at home because that helped with his work-life balance and family commitments. And he worked on a piece of data that his main job is just to pull together a lot of information and get it into one report. And historically, it's been a fairly boring job, but decent job, and it allowed him to work remotely. So he's happy with it. But Ed's a guy, and he's actually worked out a way of doing his job much, infinitely more effectively or efficiently than the long-winded way that he'd been doing it historically. So he created this program which actually sort of does the job in a few hours. A job that was taking him a week before now only really actually in real life takes a few hours. But what he'd been doing was drip feeding that merged data back into the back to the company's analyst at intervals in the same way. So he, despite the fact that actually he's collating the data in a couple of hours, not a week, he's still sending the information back to base in exactly the same time, on exactly the same timetable, exactly the same way as he did before. So they're not aware that he's actually created this program and does the job very quickly. So now he makes sure the job he's paid to do, as it were, is done very quickly, and he does his emails and everything else. But he has a lot of free time, so he's on YouTube watching dancing cats and things like this, and able to devote more time to his family, because this program is effectively that he developed is effectively doing his job in a couple of hours. He is worried about the that if they found out that it only took a few hours, that he could lose his job. There's a missing word there on the slide, is they do not much. He's not aware of much other work that he could do. So he hasn't sort of told them that he can do it like this. Next slide. Thanks. So now it's crunch time. Ed gets notification from the company saying that the company's internal auditors need to visit him, and they need to see him at home and check him out, just the same as they would have done, had he been part of a routine audit in the office. So he now that an audit team is going to be turning up, actually looking how he does it. So what is he going to do? Well, frankly, just show them the old-fashioned way. Hide his clever little program, and just show them the way he does the job, the way he's done the job historically. And then he could, perhaps tell them he's got some ideas that would actually free up some time. But he basically shows them the old way of doing it. Shows the auditors both ways, both methods, and he explains the automated tool as simply an audit tool. So he says, look, the automated tool enables me to check my manual work. So the implication is he's still working all week doing the manual, the old way of doing it, and his clever program is simply a check. So option A, just show the manual method. Option B, show them both, but present the automated program as effectively an audit tool. C, the automated method only, and then tell the auditors that, look, this would cost you a fortune. I'm willing to to sell this to the company at a discount, and I'm prepared to take a drop in salary to maintain that system. But I want quite a lot of money for the program. Just come clean. Tell the company that what he's done, that he's developed this program, and say, look, you can have the program as long as you take no action. That's the only deal I'd like. Just forgive me for having done this, and you can now own the program.
All right, great.
C and D. So if we're going to ask about voting again for the.
Yes, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, as our previous scenario, we will be opening up the poll now for all of you to give your comments. Once again, for those who may have joined late, you will find the link to the poll within the comments section within LinkedIn and Twitter, and also you will find it on the bottom of the ADGM website where you're watching. So we'd love to hear your views on this scenario. You have 4 options: A, B, C, and D. And I think, Kevin, this is relevant to a lot of people now, given the current situation and people working from home, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it had only occurred to me. It's the first time I've used this scenario since lockdown. Since many of us have spent much more time working from home, and I'm at home now. Trust is, we've had to grapple with the issue of trust of the CISI employees. Do we actually trust people? And I think the fact is, I think on the management side, so speaking as a director of the institute, we've had to, frankly, relax a bit and think, well, do you know what? Most people will do the right thing. And the evidence so far, I'm firmly convinced that the vast majority of my colleagues, and I'm sure they're no different than anyone else, are actually doing, are working hard. They're conscious that, frankly, that if they don't, then there's implications for the business and their own futures as well. When CISI is a not-for-profit organization, but as we like to say, not for loss either, wouldn't be sustainable to be losing money. So the whole issue of trust, is, as you say, very prevalent. And I was slightly horrified, but I can see why people do it, but I don't like it. The article I saw the other day about the increased sales of what I'll call programs, but effectively enabling employers to watch their employees at home. And there's a part of me that thinks that's to have to do that. There's another part of me that Well, and I mean, this scenario is based on a real life scenario. There are plenty of examples of an American. I read about an American programmer who subcontracted his work to to some Indian programmers, and then effectively took the full salary, paid a portion of that off to Indian programmers, and his bosses were very happy with him until they realised effectively that he'd subcontracted his work with data issues or data protection, all sorts of other issues. So I'm sort of appalled, but also, people will, probably not deserve trust. Therefore, I can understand why people, might want the access. I don't know what you think, Justin.
Well, I mean, I think end of the day, it's about understanding your employees and understanding, the environment that you're working in and how everyone is working together. From my personal experience, we actually worked a lot more hours when we were working remotely. And we actually didn't know when to stop. So then it became the reverse issue of ensuring that people are still giving time to their families, are still having a healthy work-life balance. And also, I would just add that we see a lot of organizations that are now moving to encouraging their employees to work from home for a longer period of time. The likes of Google and some of the departments in Amazon, they're telling their employees next 2 years, work from home or remotely.
No, I mean, even the CISI. I mean, we've made a decision to let half our floor space. So because if we have more people working at home, we don't need the office space we had based on everybody having their own desk. And the timing of the decision is obviously quite handy when business future is uncertain, revenues are uncertain. So we're making a considerable saving on our rent, and at the same time we asked the staff whether they what they wanted, and only about less than 10% of our staff actually wanted to come into the office 5 days a week, and that can be accommodated. So 90% of the office were much more comfortable with flexible working, less commute, more time with the family at the end of the day. But I completely agree with your point. I think it's one of the features, isn't it, that there are many people who will end up working unhealthily at home, too much, and finding that balance is a tricky one.
Yeah, and just to let everyone know, closing the poll, Kevin, there was the audience where someone stated it isn't clear if Ed is explicitly contracted to do the work manually or just do the work.
I mean, he's just contracted to, he's contracted as a programmer, and the task, the job given to him to do in his general contract was this particular piece of work. And of course, as far as the company's concerned, that's a 5 day a week, 9 to 5 job for him to maintain that, for him to deliver that, because that's what it used to be. And of course, what he's done is effectively, managed to do the job in a couple of hours. And it's back to the home thing, isn't it? I mean, if the company did have a spy cam, they'd have spotted that Ed was not actually even at his desk. He was away from his terminal or whatever, a lot of the time. But because they've trusted him, he's been able to do this.
Right.
We've got the results yet?
Closing the polls. So the polls are closed, and we should be receiving the feedback and answers from the audience.
It'll be interesting to see again, to look for is there a dominant answer? Is there one? Do people coalesce around one of these options? Is there a bit of a spread? And we won't have time for a discussion, but it's how you feel about this. When I've delivered this to groups, it's quite interesting. There's an ambivalence. There's a lot of sympathy for Ed. He's done a clever thing. It's not causing anybody any harm. The job's still being done. All of those things. On the other hand, honest, open, transparent, and fair. He's not really been honest. Were he in the office? I mean, at home he's been able to do this. Were he in the office, it might have attracted attention. Why isn't he? He's wandered away for an hour. He's watching YouTube. He's maybe doing something that, he's disappeared off to go home early to do something with his family. It might have come out because people would have seen a change in behavior. But because he's away, he's been able to do it. And it's just, do you congratulate Ed, or do you say, I'm sorry, Ed, you've not behaved in a way that we would want. You've not been honest, open, transparent. And it's not really fair on us as an employer that that you're doing this. You've shortchanged us. So do we have the results yet?
We do, Kevin. So we have 20% who voted A, 48% voted B, 3% voted C, and 25% voted D.
Oh, that's interesting. So we've got a spread of answers, and and I think what it's reflecting is that sympathy for Ed. That Ed has actually been pretty clever. The business is the job is still being done. The fact that he's doing it in a way super efficiently he shouldn't be penalized. On the other hand, I think a quarter of people that came up with D, are recognizing that he's not being honest. Maybe he should have flagged up to the business earlier on that you know what, I found this really clever way of doing this, and had confidence that the business wouldn't have said, oh, that's great, well, we'll only pay you 1 day a week then, Ed. So he's not being honest, and he's not given the business an opportunity to reward his honesty. He's distrusted the business. Maybe really, who knows? It's a scenario, we don't know, that he could be completely justified in his lack of trust in the business. But on the other hand, trust is mutual. You shouldn't have a situation where the employer it's demanded that the employer trust the employee. There's got to be reciprocal trust. It has to go back both ways. So we had those answers. So pretty well an answer in every A, B, C, and D all had a response from someone, A and B getting most. Let's have a look and see what the CISI's Integrity Committee came up with. That's the next. Oh, the next one after that, sorry. Next one. Next one. That's the one. There we go. So the quarter of you, so if some of you were also in the group that voted D last time, and it's a coincidence they're both D. So if you were part of the 46%, now part of the 26%, you're still eligible for CISI Integrity Committee status. So hang on in there for the next one. So let's shimmy on to the last scenario that we're going to do today. So next slide. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide because everyone's worked it all out by now. We've tried and trusted, you've voted, it's good to go. So this is my personal favorite, so I don't mind raising the expectations for this one. So now you're a managing director, so you've been promoted again. So for those of you that were feeling sort of a bit damaged by the rocky, bumpy career from chairman to heading operations supervisor, you're ending the day in this session as a managing director of a big company, and we'll call it a big financial services company. It's coming up towards the end of your financial year, and your sales team's done a great job making it onto the shortlist for an important and very profitable tender from a client that you've worked with, but this is taking business with them to another level. And if the contract comes off, then it pretty much delivers your annual numbers. So this is a really important piece of business for your company. And your team has been asked to go out to make a presentation along with some of the other shortlisted competitors. And whilst they're waiting outside the boardroom of the potential client, they see sitting a presentation pack, and it's labeled up, private and confidential, but nobody's sitting by it. It's just been left there. So they pick it up. Next slide. So they have a quick look at it before they go in, but they don't really get a chance to study it. But so they go in, make their own presentation. That goes really well, they think. But they keep the pack that they found. They keep these other documents. And when they go back to the office, they realize, yeah, it is. It's their competitors. One of the competitors' packs showing all the PowerPoint slides, the projections, the features of the offer, shows everything. Basically, it gives them a complete picture of what one of their competitors were offering. And they get a call from the client saying, it's good news, but you've got one more, there's one more stage that we've introduced because there were two businesses that we both like. They're both offering something really good. One is yours, one is another. And so we're asking you both to come back and make a final pitch for this. So you can have a chance, a couple of days to have a think and come back to us. Now, your sales team are well connected. They make a few calls, and you quickly find out that the book that you found, the documents that you found, belong to the competitor that you are now up against. So you've got the inside track here. You know exactly what your competitors were offering. So your sales team, work with other people, and you make sure that your own pitch beats this pitch on every level. You make sure that your pricing is finely tuned. Some of the features that the competition, the opposition were offering, you build them into your offer as well. So you're pretty confident this is slam dunk territory. Turn up and of course, being salespeople, then everyone's sort of boasting about it. Oh, we're going to get this. Don't worry, we're going to go out and get this business. And the story works its way around the business that this is what's happened. That the sales team have found the documents, they've used the documents, and that on that basis, this should be straightforward, sale, because we know that your company knows that the offer is stronger. And one of your colleagues, comes up to you and says, "Have you heard this story?" And tells you. You're on the phone, and tells you that comes up to you and tells you this is what's happened. So now you know the story. What are you going to do? Next slide.
And Kevin,
yeah,
we will open up polls from prior to us going into the different options. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will open up the polls. As we've mentioned before, you'll find the link within the comments section. 4 choices, A, B, C, and D. As we open the polls, Kevin will go through some of the different answers and options that you have. So over to you, Kevin.
Brilliant. Excellent. Yeah, no, that's good. I'll get us a bit of time back. So option A. Now, option A is the sort of I used to call it Wall Street option, slightly more contemporary, although it's a few years ago, the Wolf of Wall Street option. So you go bounding into the room with the sales team and you high-five the lot of them and tell them, great job, team. Go out there, get me that contract. So the option A, straightforward, you go in and congratulate them. Option B, while your colleague is telling you the story, you listen and you think, hang on, something's going on here. So you fish into your pocket, pull your phone out, put your phone to your ear, make the traditional signal that, sorry, got to take this call, and you go back to your office and close the door. So effectively, option A, congratulate. Option B, do nothing. You don't react to the story at all. Option C, now, assuming as well that you've checked and you've now realized that story is true. So, that's obviously the first thing you do is find out if it's true. So option C, then get hold of the potential client, say, look, I'm sorry, but an error has been made. We've made a mistake. And you tell the story about finding the competitor's book and everything, pitch book, and there's a mistake in the slide there, actually, something's been added. But basically option C is you say to the competitor, look, we're going to go back to the original, to our original pitch. We've not used this information. And you don't. You tell the sales team that they have to revert back to the original pitch that they'd made. And then option D, a bit more extreme, you get hold of the client, say, look, I'm really sorry. We've, on the story, we've compromised ourselves here. I'd like to withdraw. And you consider whether you'll take disciplinary action against the sales team for the way they've conducted themselves. So quite a range. A, congratulate. B, do nothing. C, try and rewind the clock a bit and go back to the original pitch. And D, offer to withdraw. Make the offer to withdraw and even consider disciplinary action. So, quite a range of options on this one. I don't know what you think, Jassim.
It's a difficult position for the managing director. Again, it's about going back to the principle of fairness. I would say there are a lot of different things that we can talk about throughout the different principles, but fairness is one of them that kind of is evident to me. And the fact that it's no longer a fair, competitive playing field for this bid itself. But again, I mean, I can see a lot of different answers coming for this one.
Yeah, no, it is. It's interesting. I mean, and again, over the years, I've seen some interesting discussions around this. There was a group of wealth managers once for a Swiss private bank, and they surprised me a bit by going, not all of them, but there was a swing towards A. There was a significant percentage of people going down the congratulation route, which surprised me. Wealth in particular, in terms of trust, I think wealth managers establish a bond of trust with their clients. So I was surprised. And when I challenged the group and said, I'm a bit surprised by this, they said, well, hang on, Kevin, it's due diligence, isn't it? It's our duty to protect clients from careless people that leave documents lying around. So we're absolutely doing the right thing. If someone's silly enough, stupid enough, careless enough even to leave documents lying around, then the client needs protection and will provide that protection. So they sort of justified doing something that on the face of it, looks fairly unethical, that you're taking something that isn't yours and using it in the way you've said. It's not honest, it's not open, it's not transparent, it's not fair. But turned it round and said, but hang on, it's in the interest of the client, which was an interesting argument.
And we'll be, just for a quick announcement, we'll be closing the poll in a little bit less than a minute. So for everyone watching, please give us your feedback and give us your inputs to the different options that you see here. What should the managing director do? This information is now become clear for him, and there are 4 different options that he can do. So just wait a few more minutes and we'll close the poll.
There's I'll just tell you another anecdote relating to this while we're waiting for these final votes. For those of you that can see the screen, we'll hold a briefcase up, because in one other group said, how did they find the documents? People ask, and I said, on the table. And someone said, okay, so being left on the table. And I said, well, would it be different if they were in a briefcase? Fair enough, on the table, careless, in a briefcase. And the group looked at me, and one guy at the front smiled, and I think it was a joke, but I think there was a serious point. He said, was the briefcase locked? And I said, what are you saying then, that you would pick a lock? No, of course we wouldn't pick a lock. So I said, okay, it's open. The briefcase is open. And his next point was how open. And we then had, and it won't work so well on a small screen, but those of you that can see it, and I'll describe it. I then put my hand into the briefcase and said, if it was going in like that, would that be okay? Oh, no. Everyone agreed that wasn't acceptable. But if the documents were poking out a bit of the briefcase, there was a point in the room, and we were laughing. But again, I think there was a little bit of truth behind it. It was like, unacceptable to put your hand in the briefcase. If they were just poking out, that probably wasn't acceptable. Poking out a lot, that was careless, in which case you could take them. If this was a room of people, and I hope some people are, people generally laugh at that notion that it's, the how open is the briefcase determines whether it is okay or not to take some documents. Not people talking about stealing.
So
let's see what the results are then.
Let's see. All right, Kevin. So somewhat even between between 2 of them, I would say. So we have 8% for option A, choice A, 4% for B, 37% for C, and 50% for D.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, we've got that nice spread. So, in terms of lessons from this session, which is accredited BD with our partners ADGM Academy, there is no single answer that everyone has gone for, which displays the ambiguity. Most people have gone down C and D. Interesting that, I don't know what the total numbers are, but the only answer there I think that is really difficult to justify is B, funnily enough, because I think A, arguably you're at least being honest. You're being wrong. Maybe I'm shortcutting what might have been a longer discussion, but at least you're being open and transparent about it. So you're not being honest, but you are being open and transparent. Your team, though, this is very much, I think, Wolf of Wall Street, Jason Belfort territory. People around him knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't hiding it from them. B, I feel is a bit difficult to defend because it's probably very realistic, but plausible deniability. And I suspect a lot of that has gone on in businesses, you know, like on and WorldCom and others that historically have gone under, you know, being maybe a core group that knew what was going on, but other people chose not to know. So I think you're being, as a boss as well, you're being a bit, you're trying to have your cake and eat it, because you want to make sure you're out of the blast zone if it goes wrong, because you can say, I knew nothing. But on the other hand, if it comes out, then you can blame your sales team. So I don't like B, that's more personal. But C and D, I think you can, you know, again, in terms of a scenario, you can justify. And I think you'll find that the Integrity Committee agree there with the majority of people today as well, that the answer is.
So it was, we could see that towards the end that more were, I would say, the last one, the one that was most interesting, which is this one here, would move more towards C and D, which is interesting to see. So this is the end of the presentation segment. We will now just transition over for our conclusion.
So, Jassim, shall I conclude? I was waiting for the flames of the virtual fireside, but we'll leave those options up. I mean, I think I was beginning to summarize anyway. I mean, if this presentation over the years has taught me anything, it is that there is always disagreement. You know, some the numbers change, the percentages change. It might only be a minority, but it only needs a minority of people to do the wrong. And, you know, that can have huge repercussions for general trust. I mean, I can't back it up with a statistic, but my feeling is, having worked in financial services for many years and met, you know, many people, is that, you know, the vast majority of people want to do the right thing. If they make a mistake, it's a mistake. It's not a conspiracy. It wasn't necessarily, it wasn't greed or it was just a mistake. But some, you know, there are some people who will cut corners, not put the customer first, not build the doing the right thing into their decision-making process. And talk at the moment about ESG. Well, I think, you know, lack of trust is not sustainable. You know, so I think it's critical that, you know, people build integrity into their decision-making, into their everyday discussions with people, and flush out basically misunderstandings, perhaps, or flush out those people that are intent on doing something or would do something bad if left to their own devices.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Kevin. And thank you for joining us today on discussing integrity at work. It's been an interesting session and an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been really enjoyable doing it virtually. I'd much rather be with you in Abu Dhabi, delivering it to real people in a real room, but, you know, maybe time.
Definitely. And to our audience, we thank you for listening and participating today. You have made this session engaging and interactive, and we hope you have all taken some information away with you. Please don't forget to watch our second session taking place tomorrow, titled Leveraging Islamic Finance. Once again, my name is Jasmine Marzougi, and thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day ahead.